The King's Indian Defense. But why did I slot the deadliest opening of all time at number 10 for our list? Well, the thing is, it's such a complex opening that it can only be truly deadly once you've mastered these 3 little stages. Think of it as your uncle. Gentle at the start, devastating at the finish. Stage 1 is the setup. You patiently allow your opponent to build a commanding presence in the center, while you focus on a solid kingside fianchetto. Key moves like pawn d6 are crucial to prevent the white pawn on e4 from harassing your knight. Bishop g7, and then you castle your king. There's nothing dangerous about the King's Indian Defense. Yet. It's the calm before the storm. That silence after you reveal who you really voted for at your 2-year-old nephew's birthday party. Stage 2 is the central strike. You punch back by attacking the center with the pawn thrust e5. Any white player worth their salt will respond with d5, and as soon as the center is locked, ladies and gentlemen, this is when you start preparing the all-out assault on white's kingside. Stage 3. The moves are knight e8, knight d7, or knight h5. The core idea is to prepare the crucial pawn break f5, followed by a storm of subsequent pawn moves headed straight toward white's king. These thrusts will be aided by minor pieces, the bishop on c8, and the queen. The goal is simple: seek and destroy. Only when you've executed the King's Indian with these 3 steps can you know whether or not it matches your style. Because the whole point of this video is to give you a feel for the positions that arise from what I consider the deadliest openings for Blitz chess. I want you to explore and find an opening that genuinely clicks with your personality. And my price? Well, a few dollars from that money you're hiding from your wife. This is a good cause. The Hippopotamus Defense. The waiting game. Personally, what I find to be the deadliest plan below the 1000 rating level is simply castling on the opposite side. This is how you guarantee fireworks on the board. White plays d4, or pretty much any other opening sequence. Your response essentially involves a deep, tight structure where black plays a series of patient, passive moves: b6, g6, a6, h6, e6, d6, waiting to see where the opponent decides to park their king. It's a waiting game, with a deadly plan. Because once your opponent castles, kingside for example, you immediately castle queenside, and launch a devastating pawn storm attack on their kingside. It's not correct, but it's aggressive. A lot like most of your comments down there. But at your level, they simply won't know how to punish this basic idea. You put your bishop on this diagonal, aiming at the enemy king. But instead of the engine's suggested pawn g6, I usually play pawn h6, followed immediately by pawn g5 and the full throttle attack. The small problem is, your opponent can do the same to you. But since you're a Mortal Chess subscriber, I won't leave you hanging. The trick is to lock the center. Why? We don't need fireworks there, that's why. We need the center and the queenside to stay calm and quiet so that we can launch absolute chaos where their king is located. But how do you silence the queenside? Well, a move like a6 is great. If white tries to expand with b5, you play a5, locking that side completely. Master the art of locking the board where you want calm, and unleashing hell where you want chaos, and the hippo will be good to you. Now, granted, above 2000 elo, they will punish you ruthlessly, but below 1500, this simple strategy makes the hippo a very deadly tool in your arsenal. The Englund Gambit. The Englund Gambit makes it at number 7, simply because white players still do not know how to refute it consistently. And they will waste time trying to find a refutation on the fly. That's the real trap. White takes, and the fun begins. Knight c6 attacks the pawn. White does all they can to defend, but as soon as queen b4 check hits the board, all sorts of chaos ensues. The idea? Well, it's just like when a country grants you asylum. You cause as much immediate chaos as you can. And when they eventually find the refuting moves, the true advantage of this opening kicks in. You will be up at least a full minute on the clock. Players around 1000 elo know the opening is bad, they know it has a refutation, and they fancy themselves scientists who must find it on the fly. They will burn time, find some decent moves, but at the end of the day, you're only a pawn down and you're up a decent amount of time. So if you are dirty enough to use the clock to your advantage, this is a great surprise weapon to have in your arsenal. The Benko Gambit. The Benko is probably the only gambit on this list that is still playable all the way up to master level. It starts with d4, knight f6, c4. White builds the center, and black immediately challenges it with the Sicilian-like thrust c5. After d5, black plays pawn b5, and this is the Benko Gambit. You give away the b pawn, and then you trade the a pawn. But the idea is simple. You have created two semi-open files on the flank. You will put your heavy pieces on these files, and with the aid of that dark squared bishop on g7, these two pawns should not stand a chance, eventually leading to a protected passed pawn on c5, that you will use to win a very simple endgame. Great for Blitz, because if you have a clear plan, you don't waste time trying to figure out where to put your pieces. And while your opponent suffers in calculation, you'll end up with an extra minute to try and figure out if they really went to the moon. The Sicilian Dragon. In the same spirit of the Benko Gambit, we have the Sicilian Dragon. If you fancy a very aggressive, high-octane fundamental game, the dragon is how you turn on the ignition. e4 and c5 is the Sicilian, but only after knight f3, knight c6, d4, takes and g6, does it become the dragon Sicilian. The deadly plan is to place the bishop on g7. White often plays knight c3 followed by bishop e3 and queen d2, castling queenside. The famous kingside fianchetto is built for black, but what are the long-term plans? Black brings the rook to the semi-open c-file and combines it with the firepower of the bishop, and some minor piece maneuvers to cause as much chaos as possible. It's not as solid as the Benko in terms of guaranteed compensation, and that's because you haven't given up any material. But if you love a king hunt, with opposite side mayhem, the Sicilian Dragon is definitely an opening you should be looking to play. The Budapest Gambit. Now we've come to an actual gambit. One where you truly have to risk a little more than a pawn. But the risks, well, they often pay off very well. d4, knight f6, c4 and pawn e5. That is the Budapest. White takes, and black plays knight g4, hitting the pawn. White protects the pawn with knight f3, after which d6 offers to exchange the pawn. White often obliges, takes, bishop takes, and believe it or not, in this position, black wins a whopping 60% of the time. That's because most people will fall for the lazy move h3 here, after which, you're probably getting intercontinental ballistic missile flashbacks. That's that pattern recognition. Use it more often, and very soon, someone will call you a misogynist. Knight takes f2 and after king takes, we get the finishing blow. Bishop g3 check. The king must move, and the queen is lost. A beautiful sequence. The catch? Well, above a certain rating, they know the simple knight c3 move that ruins all the fun. But if you are a betting man, and don't mind staking a pawn for a possible queen, the Budapest Gambit is a must-learn. The Elephant Gambit. At number 4, despite the fact that it is a somewhat well-known gambit, we have e4, e5, knight f3 and pawn d5. The Elephant Gambit is still pretty much the nastiest gambit you can play with the black pieces. Because after white takes, there are still some tricky lines that are not well known. Like bishop d6. You don't bother capturing the pawn, you focus on rapid development. White will continue with normal moves like knight c3, knight f6, bishop c4, and after castles, a sequence that is played almost 50% of the time. The following is the most fun you will have with your clothes on. Because of the simple but brilliant pawn e4. The knight sidesteps the attack d4. And white is already dead lost. The fatal sequence begins with bishop takes h2 check. The Greek gift sacrifice. King takes, knight g4 check, and after the king retreats to g1, you get queen h4. How do you protect against checkmate on h2? Well, some people might try to sacrifice the queen, which leads to a game I know none of you guys would ever lose. The Russo Gambit. The Russo Gambit makes it number 3 on this list. The sheer number of tricks and traps you can unleash on your opponent here is insane. And perfect. Because the only opponent you should be losing to, is one that has studied intensely. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, and pawn f5 is the surprising pawn push on move 3. Takes, and then e4 harasses the knight. If you're finding the pattern, good for you. Most of these gambits are all about harassing this knight. And while your opponent finds shelter for the knight, they usually leave room for some deadly tactics. Let's say white plays queen e2 clinging onto the knight. Black responds with queen e7, restoring the attack on the knight. The knight retreats to g1, and now the very important move, knight f6. The most common move that is played all the way up to 1600 LO, is the move pawn d3. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is where the fun begins. Knight d4, hitting the queen with a double threat. Wherever the queen goes, she must keep an eye on that c2 pawn. Let's say queen d2. And guess what? Knight takes c2 check anyway. After the queen captures, the very nasty pawn takes d3 check, and the queen is gone. But this is just the least of the traps that exist in this opening. The Englund Gambit is a nasty tool to use all the way up to intermediate level. But an even nastier tool is the sponsor for today's video, chessreps.com. They created an interesting, Duolingo-like method to learn all these openings. I mean actually learn them, instead of giving away a pawn, and then winging it from move 4. You can start completely free, no account, no commitment, and if you like it, you can get a membership later for as little as $3. It works well for openings like the Russo, because it walks you through the tricks and traps step by step, and then beats them into your memory with time trials and drill mode. So you start knowing exactly what to do. Yes, even after move 4. Go to chessreps.com and check it out, but if typing is too much cardio for you, there's a link in the pinned comment. God save you during the apocalypse. The Philidor Defense. e4 e5, knight f3 and pawn d6 protecting e5, is the Philidor Defense. This has to be the most significant opening on this list today. Why? Because all kinds of chess masters will tell you that this is, without a doubt, the worst opening in chess. Why? Because after d4, black does not seem to achieve equality against a strong opponent. But here's the secret. Nobody below 1500 plays pawn d4, in fact, the most played move here is bishop c4. And today, we're going to take advantage of that ignorance. Why? Because the simple move knight f6, personally, is the most fun I've had on the chessboard. That's because people who play knight f3 and bishop c4, all have one thing in mind, knight g5 attacking the f7 pawn, the fried liver attack. Except, this is the Philidor Defense. d5. Sacrificing a pawn, and after takes, the move h6 triggers all the nasty tricks. The knight has two options. It can come to e5, where after queen e7, statistically, black wins a whopping 70% of the time. Yes, 70%. But after say, knight d4, you simply play bishop d6. A tricky, quiet move. And then watch as all your opponents castle into their own death. The tactic is hidden, but again, that pattern recognition. Bishop takes h2 check. Because king takes h2 allows knight g4 check, the king retreats, and queen h5. How do you stop the checkmate? What makes this even deadlier is that people have neglected studying it, because it is known as a bad opening. We're going to take advantage of that laziness. Because at the end of this video, I will link a full breakdown of all the tactical gaps I found in this terrible opening.
And then, finally, the ascension. A brief moment that silences all the noise of this ugly world. What is beauty? Why is it so deep within the marrow of our being we seem to wander this lonely universe, forever in search of the one true beautiful? And what is it about her that is so inherently terrifying? Perhaps beauty is the ultimate truth, a mirror exposing every insecurity, an eye that pierces our fear of inadequacy, only to whisper, "It's okay. Beauty only sees beauty." So the part of us that yearns for it, therefore, must already be beautiful. And maybe the scattered breadcrumbs of beauty throughout existence are nothing more than a silent message. Come back home. And yet, as we slowly begin the ascension, preparing to face the ultimate form, one question grows ever so louder. Are we worthy